So, welcome to the study of life and the nature of the laws of thought. That's the science of mind. The conception that we live in a spiritual universe, that God is in us, around us, and for us, and there is nothing against us. That definition was written by Dr. Holmes. He wrote The Science of Mind and came up with a definition that applies to everybody. You see, because I believe we are here by divine appointment. This is not an accident that we are together. It is not an accident that this arrangement of people from all different backgrounds have come together to spend an hour or so together to talk about the upliftment of their own personal individualized consciousness and that of the world. So I titled my talk today, The Power of Inclusion. Soul evolution is the awakening of itself to a recognition of its oneness with the whole. In metaphysical language, soul has many different meanings, functions, some of which may even sound contradictory in terms. The most practical and easiest of which to grasp is the aspect of one's self-perception. That's the easiest conception that it is easy to grasp, and that is your perception of self contains in it the essence of your soul. How do you see yourself? When you look in the mirror, what do you see? Just a mirror image of your physical body? Or is there a self that is invisible that you can recognize, that you speak about, that you talk about, that becomes you? How do you see yourself? What you have made up about yourself becomes your soul evolving. An example is a deep feeling of no good. Sometimes people make up that kind of story about themselves, not feeling good enough or feeling superior. I'm better than so-and-so. I'm better than this and that. We make up stories about ourselves, and that becomes our soul identity. You know, people say, I'm always being critical about oneself. A lot of people are very critical about themselves. And criticizing oneself is not enhancing to the invisible image that you see of yourself. So, devaluating oneself is definitely not an enhancement to one's individual recognition of oneself. These feelings usually lead to a sense of separation and being uncomfortable among others and less than. So how have you been speaking about you? Have you ever said things about yourself that you hope people won't remember or believe? I know that we each have some secret about ourselves that we're hiding from others. Why? Because it's not right. It's not good to speak that way about ourselves. Here's a quote from The Science of Mind. And I want you to remember this quote. It's on page 102. It says this: could we understand absolute causation, we should perceive it to be pure intelligence operating through perfect law and producing effects which have their being not by virtue of an isolated life, but by reason of a universal unity which permeates all things. There's a universal unity, a universal oneness, a universal wholeness that permeates all things, in spite of our perhaps wrong naming ourselves, wrong thinking about ourselves. In spite of all of that, this unity cannot be damaged, injured, or diminished in any way. Things live and have their being not by virtue of an isolated life, but by reason of a universal unity which permeates all things. Remember that you cannot talk God out of being God in your life. You could talk yourself out of being conscious of God, but you can't talk God out of being with you, because God cannot be separated from himself, because you are made in the image and likeness of God, so you're part of God's creation, part of God's self. You can't separate that. You can separate that in your own mind. And you know, we experience what we think about, true or false. It says, things live and have their being not by virtue of an isolated self, but by reason of a universal unity which permeates all things. Today, we could all have a clearer understanding of the concept of the one indivisible unity as a state of mind. We all live from that and have our being in it, and of which we could always be conscious. It is possible to live a life of always being conscious that God is present in you. How many times have you walked into a building and said, God is present here? No, you say, let's see who's here. And you begin to look on the external. But if you look inside, you brought God in there with you. God was there too, because God is omnipresent. You see, omnipresence means no absence whatsoever. God cannot be absent. Whether you believe it or not, the fact and the truth is God cannot be absent. The awakening of the soul to this recognition is what we try to help people arrive at. Everything is deeply rooted in a universal oneness. What kind of world would we have if we all walked this planet in that consciousness? But it takes a healthy evolution of the soul. The soul, remember, is not something that you can put in a box. It's intangible, and at the same time, you can feel it. You can't touch it, but you can feel it. Know the difference? I'll give you a challenge to think about that. So, a realization that it is by reason of a universal unity which permeates all things. So, what if we really live our lives in this awakened state? We would take anything personally, would we? We would not take anything personally. We wouldn't resist change. We would live fully each moment. We would stop trying to fix everybody. We would try real hard to remember that God didn't die and put us in charge. You know, a lot of people think that God died and put him in charge, so they take over to try and fix people. That's not your job. Your job is to live the life of the presence of God as love, as unity, as oneness, as wholeness, as compassion. When you live that way, that in itself is a testimony of the divine's presence. How is your quantum studies today explain this principle today? Quantum studies explained it this way. True processes and quantum systems are analogous in that they cannot be analyzed too much in terms of distinct elements, because the intrinsic nature of each element is not a property existing separately from and independently of other chemicals, but is instead a property that arises partially from its relation with other elements. This is from the book called The Quantum Self. I love reading that book, The Quantum Self. It really helps you to understand how the mixture of all the senses that we experience play into a sense of wholeness, of oneness. You see, God does not separate itself, as I said before, God is the essence of oneness and does not even conscious of separation. Separation hurts us. You ever felt separated from someone you love dearly? You know what that pain feels like? Well, what happens? How do you think that the feeling of others have when they feel you're separating yourself from them? I went for a while with this statement. The statement is a statement that backs up the variety or the veritable truth of oneness Emerson talks about. Unity passing into variety. Emerson talks about that unity passing into variety. End of quote. I am so much in awe of this universal intelligence that puts all things together and lets us alone to discover ourselves. We were put into the world to discover this incredible truth of oneness, of wholeness, of our soul evolving to that state. This is the joy of living. People in the physical sciences understand this principle, and that's why research continues even as we speak. A healthy soul perspective is essential to all of that. Could we understand absolute causation? We should perceive it to be pure intelligence operating through perfect law and producing effects which have their being not by virtue of an isolated life, but by the wonderful stuff of life. You know, on page 102 in The Science of Mind, Holmes says this: the stuff out of which our bodies are made is the same etheric substance from which all things are made. The one mind conceives all things. From unity, which is the one, back of all things, through the one law, which is the medium of all action, multiplicity is manifested. But the many never contradict the unity of the whole. When we realize that we are dealing with an infinite intelligence and with an infinite law within this intelligence, we see that no limit should be placed upon the creative principle. There is nothing that you can conjure up in your mind that can limit the creative principle. That creative principle is infallible. I believe we are really quantum beings having an experience of non-quantum existence until we wake up to the truth of our true essence, which rather has to be actively shaking us up to wake up. Something is always shaking us up to wake us up to the truth of our own true selves. It is time to seek and practice the truth of our oneness, that which made us and dropped us off on planet Earth. Let us fall in love with this great discovery and begin to live our mission by helping others to become aware of the truth about themselves. Get on board. Get on board with that which is worth living for at this time. Jump in, the water is warm. You're not going to suffer. You're going to smile. You know, that song that Susan sang about oneness, it was just perfect, was inspired. I don't know how she came up with it, but that's what works for us. There is a sense of unity that is invisible and manifests itself in unique and very special ways. It's always present, you know. We can't see it because it's invisible. So today, I'm going to read the affirmation, and I want you to listen to this and see if it feels differently now. Today, I am conscious of the power of oneness and inclusivity. The one God, the one life, and the one spirit which life is the life of all life. Today I know and am constantly aware of the divine principle of inclusivity, which allows me to joyfully experience the beauty of universal oneness with all humanity. I live and move and have my being as a conscious participant, hand in hand with all human beings, to joyfully share uniqueness in its limitless divine variety. All people share and have their being in the one God, the one Spirit, the one life. And so it is. If you have a desire to experience a certain kind of change, which is better for you and the rest of the world, because every time you better yourself, you better the people around you. It may not show up immediately, but the impact is there. Change always, permanent change takes place from inside out. And sometimes we don't know when it has begun. So I would say, work on the side of it taking place every time you change you in a better way. So if you close your eyes now, I will leave a moment of silence in my prayer for you to name what it is that you want to change into and the impact you would like to make in the world. All right. Let us begin. I know there is only one life, and that life is God. It is God life. It is divine life. That divine life is infinite wisdom. It is omnipotent power. It is always present. And it is the life of all life. It is the original life. It is my life. My life came out of that one life. I am made in the image and likeness of that one life. And I know this is true about every life. Everyone within the sound of my voice and the sight of my vision comes out of that same one life. There are no two lives. There is only one life expressing itself in multiplicity, limitless variety. And so I honor that life by recognizing it as my life and the life of all other lives. And since I know this is true, I can declare for myself now how my life might be a blessing not only to myself, but to everyone around me. And so now I leave a moment of silence for each person to name in their own heart the life that they want to live that is a blessing to our world. Speak your truth now. And with deep gratitude, I say, thank you, God and me. Thank you, life, for waking me up to this truth. Thank you, presence, that allows me to be an energy that harmonizes, that unites, that brings peace, harmony, and love, not only to myself, but to my world. I'm here as a human being, experiencing what it means to be human, but I am pure spirit, made out of the one. Each person is spirit having a human experience. I give thanks for the power of the spoken word, for the breath of life is breathed into every word. That life is the one life. I give thanks for that. I give thanks for the energized word that has been spoken on each person's behalf. And I release these words to the action of that law that only knows how to make it manifest superlatively well. I release these words, declaring that it is already done in the mind of God. And so it is. Amen. And now it's a time that we invite you to share with us the kind of financial support that we need to keep our movement going, to keep our power present in the world. So if you have gifts, if you have tithes, if you have an amount you'd like to give, I'm going to ask Gary to explain to you where to send that and how to make it out. You can say make it out to CTCSL and send it to P.O. Box 1261, Middletown, Connecticut. We will receive it, and if it's a check, you will get a canceled check to show that you did make a donation. If you put cash in that box, it may not be delivered directly to us, so please do a check or credit card charge.
Yes, and our treasurer is taking care of that, so you will get a notice at the end of the year stating what you donated, which is a tax-free donation. The website is a great way for you to look at that information. There's a link on there, so you can use PayPal.
Yes.
And also the newsletter, there's links. So we try to make it available for everyone to see it, so you don't have to search for it. I think we've done a fairly decent job.
Yes, thank you.
And
yes, I am so blessed. Say that to yourself. I am so blessed. You know, that sense of gratitude that happens inside of you when you say that, it causes multiplication to take place of the blessing that you are blessing. Because you bless a blessing and it triples, quadruples, I don't know how many times, because you're appreciative and that you are grateful for that. So I wish for each of you a wonderful week. Let this be the start of a brand new life for you on an accelerated level of awareness, awakening, of peace, of joy, of happiness, and success. I wish you all of that and so much more. And I love you all to pieces. Everybody, love you to pieces. Thank you for smiling back. Thank you for letting me know that you're hearing and for participating in a way that's intangible but yet can be felt internally. Now I get to look at all the faces.
thank you, Rev Patrick. We love you also.
Yeah, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Yes. People are waving, yes. Thank you. Great. That's good.